another big issue that we're having nowadays. And I think you did recently do some videos about this, where, of course, on everybody's brain, when, people might be like, yeah, I want to mill my own grains, I want to eat this way, I can't afford it. Eating healthy is too expensive, and grocery store prices, I get it. I 100% get it. Finances are a factor. So I get questions of how do I afford to eat healthy? People who are on fixed incomes, for those on a budget, prices are rising. So what are your tips for eating healthy when you have like no money?
Yeah, number one is realize God is not a fixed income limitation.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is when we have a mindset of fixed income, we also have a mindset of a fixed blessing from God. And we pretty much close the door for how he's going to work. And I share a story several times about how I was driving down the road and I went to a farmer's market, and this farmer just kept bragging about his organic garden. He said, I got the best 2 acres in the whole state of Virginia. I'm like, okay, can I come visit? And so on my way to driving there, I drove by a house that had their garden was just overflowing. And I thought, wow, they've got a lot of produce just falling off the vine. And so I went to my farmer and I met with him and I worked out a deal. And literally, he was throwing food away because even the food bank wouldn't come and get it. I mean, just he filled my Ford Explorer with these crates of food. And I promised I'll bring half of it back dehydrated, and now you can start selling it at the market dehydrated. He thought that was fabulous. I got free food. On the way back, I stopped at that farm and I went up to the door and I said, I see that you have a lot of, tomatoes and, peppers and all this is just overflowing in your garden. Do you need help picking this? And I can bring it in for you. And she says, girl, I am so over my head done with tomatoes. I don't want to see another tomato. She
Oh,
says,
yeah.
you just go pick all you want. So I went out there and I had 6 grocery bags full of tomatoes. Then her husband comes around the corner with a couple of grocery bags full of cucumbers and peppers and onions and squash. And my Explorer, my 98 Explorer, SUV was packed to the gill all the way to the front seat with free food.
Wow.
And so the only thing that's limited is our mindset and our belief in what God can provide. We are not on a fixed income, we're on a fixed belief system. And some people are going to be offended by me saying that. They're like, well, Annette, you don't understand. Yes, I do. We raised our family on a fixed income, but I never stopped looking for where God was going to provide. So that's number one. Number two is buying buckets of grain can satisfy my family for a longer period of time than chips, Pop Tarts, and processed foods, Hamburger Helper, all of that stuff. It may cost you less at the store, but I can feed a family more satisfying meals for less cost by being able to spend 10 more minutes in the cooking of that meal and giving them something extremely satisfying. Like right now, we're in a situation in our world that we really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, if the borders the ocean borders choose to close or go on strike, well, we'll be without food within 3 days. And so, but if I have oat berries, if I have wheat berries, if I have some oil stocked up, if I have salt and a sweetener, I can make amazing meals. I could probably make 1,001 different meals and my family will be satisfied and happy. And so will my daughter because I have enough for her too. so
Yeah.
so realize the question when they say that is not the actual truth, it's a mindset. Like I say with that story about the car being filled, I had to call all my friends like, hey, come get some free produce. That has not been a one-time event. When I cross the threshold of the grocery store, I just say, Lord, you know my budget. You know what you want me to pick up. And we've all wasted money in the grocery store just by impulse buys.
Mm-hmm.
But I also will be directed to clearance items like, oh, I didn't know. Or I will talk to the grocery store produce managers like, hey, do you have anything that you might be throwing out? Now, they've gotten wise to that and they would rather pitch it than help people, which is really crazy, but that's on them.
Mm.
God will always direct me to the best buy for my dollar value that I have to spend that week. And I don't ever want to limit what God's going to do in my life, but food may have to take a priority over new pair of shoes, over other things. In the olden days, in the Depression, you cared more about what you fed your family than what you put on their feet. And many of us have a closet full of shoes and a closet full of clothes. And so, do we really need all of those extra things, or is it more important to feed our family? So, I've kind of gone over three different things. It's your belief, it's your how much you expect God to answer your prayers in the grocery store. And then what are you buying in place of food? And food is the most important thing you're doing with your family.
Yeah, those are all excellent points. Like I need them like on a graphic or something. But yeah, I think you made an excellent point of limiting it as a limitation on their beliefs, because we do read in the Bible as Christians that Jesus said, ask, ask, and ye shall receive. You know, people say I can't afford a grain mill. Well, personally speaking, I believe that a grain mill is a need. Like that is super important, and God wants you to have it. And I believe that if you pray for one, I absolutely believe that the Lord will give it to you. But yes, I do believe that this is another way, that it is a step of faith. It is a mindset change. I think I read, again, can't remember where I read it, but you know, Americans, what we spend on our grocery budget compared to like France, other countries, we know the French really care about their food. And I think they're willing to spend like, 25-30% of their income on their food, where Americans were spending like 7 to 10%, and people kind of freak out about spending that much. Well, it is a priority. Maybe you don't need the big house. Come down on on the mortgage, and like you said, you don't have to have a million shoes, you don't have to have the latest phone. Yeah, ultimately it is, if it's a priority for you, then you will find a way to make it work. And yes, people will be offended about it, but it is kind of tough love. Let's stop just throwing that out as an excuse. Oh, I can't afford it. Well, have you actually thought about it? Have you prayed about it? So yeah, I'm gonna have to replay that. Those were excellent points. So you've written many good books. I want them all. They're all on my wish list. So far I have the Treasures of Healthy Living, which is your Bible study. Yeah,
Yep.
12-week Bible study to be done either in a group or by yourself, whatever you can do. So that is really great. I recommend. But if someone wants to go deeper into understanding what real food is, looking past all the fad diets, what the Bible actually says about our health, our nutrition, a ton of resources out there. So where would you say is a good place to start? If people are confused, it's overwhelming, where should I start?
I agree with you. The Treasures of Healthy Living Bible Study, and I always spiral buying mine because it's
Mhm.
easier because they're
Yeah.
so big. It is the number one place to start, because let's get the biblical principles in place and then let God add the menu second. And so that just makes perfect sense. And that's just how I've always started.
Mm.
And there's a nutrition manual that is like an encyclopedia of answers. It's incredible. My favorite cooking, well, I got the Healthy Treasures cookbook, which is just, my husband said, I'll eat healthy if it tastes good.
Yeah.
So in the classes that I taught and the other classes that were taught with this Bible study, we collected all the recipes where people changed the ingredients to make them healthier. And then we just put together recipes that families will love. So that's the Healthy Treasures cookbook. Now, my favorite baking book is Satisfied Baking with Whole Grains. And that's all of the fun breads, the
Yeah.
holiday breads, the special event breads. That one's just kind of a delight. But I must tell you, my very favorite book of all time is The Seven Foods of the Promised Land.
Hmm.
One, it's just a gorgeous book. The artist did an excellent job. But two, if we want to be biblical, then why did God mention certain foods in the Bible? And so I go back into the history of why God chose those specific seven foods. The story changes your whole perspective of going into the promised land. He cared so much for them, and he cares the same for us today, that he had seven specific foods waiting and ready for them. And now, as you start studying biblical events and biblical feasts, every one of them is focused on one of those seven foods. And so, but
Mm.
there's a reason, and there's a very specific reason why he chose those 7 foods. And that book is such a delight. It's totally my favorite. So it's 7 Foods of the Promised Land.
Yeah, that's definitely one I wanted to get a hold of because it looks fascinating. And I do find it interesting. You made an excellent point that when God described the promised land, he said, is it a land flowing in milk and honey? He didn't say, oh, it has all 4 seasons or it has plenty of grass. So it's great for all your cattle. The fact that he narrowed it down to communicating of the food that is there. And that was communicating how good of a land that it was. So yeah, that sounds like whenever I saw you come out with that book a while ago, I was like, oh, that looks like a very, very fascinating book. So the Treasures of Healthy Living, starting with that. And then that also has a cookbook that comes with it. And then the Foods of the Promised Land, 7 Foods of the Promised Land. And we will be linking all of that in the description box below. So bottom line, y'all, it's very simple to eat God's way. I would say it's not necessarily easy or convenient, especially starting off. You are going to be going against the grain, but it is truly simple. And Annette Reader's here, the Biblical Nutritionist, to definitely help you all the way. So thank you for allowing me to talk with you, Annette.